in New York. Fox's alert now on a potential extremist Muslim compound in the state of New Mexico. A judge now agreeing to release 5 suspects on bond despite the wishes of the sheriff's department and the FBI. The charges against them are shocking. Everything from child abuse to training kids to holding to carry out school shootings. We're keeping a close eye in this case. A live report coming up in a matter of moments here. First, though, there are breaking developments out of London. Police now investigating a terrorist attack right outside of Parliament yet again. Good morning, everybody. I'm Bill Hemmer. It's a busy Tuesday already, live inside of America's Newsroom. Yes. And Julie, welcome back to you.
I'm Julie Banderas in for Sandra Smith. And British authorities are saying a driver in his late 20s deliberately slammed his car into pedestrians earlier today. They are calling this a deliberate attack on an iconic landmark. The suspect was arrested at the scene. Police say he is not cooperating with their investigation.
He's been arrested on suspicion of terrorism offences and has been taken to a South London police station where he remains in custody. Given that this appears to be a deliberate act, the method, and this being an iconic site, we are treating it as a terrorist incident.
Benjamin Hall, the very latest live on the scene in central London. Benjamin, what do you have at this hour? Hello.
Yeah, hi, Bill. Well, as you just heard there, police now treating this as a terrorist incident, and it's that method that we've seen used so often, a vehicle to mow down people. Fortunately, no fatalities took place earlier this morning, but 10 people were injured, 2 of them seriously, 1 remains hospitalized. Now the investigation gets underway to determine who this man is. It began at 7:37 this morning when a car moving around Parliament Square careered across the middle of the road, knocking over cyclists, sending them flying before then trying to enter a gate at Parliament, where he then crashed into that fence. There was a security booth just by there, and this is that incredibly heavily protected part of London. Police on the scene immediately. They took the man from the car. He did not try to escape. The video shows him calm, collected, putting up no resistance. They still do not know who he is because he's not talking to police, but they believe he had no secondary attack planned, as they found no explosives or no weapons in the car, as is so often the case when you have attacks like this. Police say he's in his late 20s, but again, they're still trying to determine who he is. He's not known to police or to security services at this point, and he is remaining quiet. But the British police are meeting later with Cobra, which is the security meeting, and Theresa May will chair that. This was rush hour, early this morning, one of London's busiest areas. The members of Parliament would not actually have been here because it's currently recess. But now the operation underway to find out who he was. Was he a lone wolf? Are there other potential threats out there? And of course, this will all remind people of that attack which took place March of last year when 6 people were killed in exactly the same square. And it was because of the lessons learned from that attack that security was beefed up here. And the quick response of the police is what is being so credited with preventing any further fatalities or injuries here. Bill?
Benjamin, how much you know so far about the surveillance camera that are set up all over central London, and how much that might be able to help in the early part of this investigation?
Well, the cordon is still quite wide for this. They've just allowed us to get a bit closer, but they are looking all over the CCTV. They're looking all around the area where this car crashed, hoping to pick up any evidence of who this man was and how this was carried out, and whether or not they have to readdress security issues. But of course, CCTV cameras are all important, tracking where he came from, where he originated, where he lives, and that's what they're trying to look for now. And what you do often see in the hours after an attack like this is arrests, detentions taking place as they try to crack down to find out if this man was a lone wolf, if there are other threats out there. So we're waiting to hear more information from the police about that. But at the moment, here, central London at least seems to be calm. Bill?
Thank you, Benjamin. Benjamin Hall, updates when we get them from London on that breaking news. Benjamin Hall, thank you. You mentioned this Cobra meeting here in a moment here. Theresa May, the Prime Minister, is holding a meeting in a moment, and we're going to bring you all these updates right now as we track the latest from London. So stay tuned for more on that coming up momentarily.
We talk about Maxine Waters and Nancy Pelosi. Maxine Waters, the new face of the Democrat Party. Low IQ person. Low IQ. And this is really what is steering, to a certain extent, the Democrats. I mean, she gets up and she wants people to be violent. She wants people to attack if they happen to be on our side.
That was on the stump last night. President Trump trying to link Democratic candidates, one of the party's more controversial figures. California Democrat Maxine Waters. Meanwhile, primaries underway today in 4 different states. Democrats, especially focused on the Midwest, holding on to control in Minnesota and upending Republicans in Wisconsin. That's the hope. RNC Chairman Ronna McDaniel with me now, and good morning to you. What are you looking at today? Scott Walker survived 3 different lives. He's fighting for a 4th in Wisconsin. What do you think, Ronna?
Well, there's no better campaigner than Scott Walker, and he's been a fantastic governor. I think he obviously is going to have a win today, and he's going to have a tough election. He always does, but he always comes through. We're going to be watching Wisconsin. We're going to be watching Paul Ryan's race. In Minnesota, we have opportunities to pick up some seats in the House in the 1st and the 8th district. So we're very optimistic that we can flip some seats in Minnesota. And of course, we've got some Senate races in Minnesota as well. And I think Tina Smith is somebody we'll be looking at closely. Karen Housley is a great challenger and has an opportunity to flip that seat.
I know you look at turnout very closely. How would you categorize Republican turnout to date in these primaries?
You know, in California, we had higher turnout in 6 of the 7 target districts. That's obviously a battleground state for the Democrats. It's their path to the majority. In Ohio, we had higher turnout. In Georgia and South Carolina. In these specials, it's been harder to gauge because it's in the summer and off years. But the turnout across these primaries, we have been matching the enthusiasm of the Democrats, and I expect we'll do that in November as well.
It is clear the strategy is shaping up to go after Nancy Pelosi, and to a lesser degree, I guess, Maxine Waters from the clip we just heard from the president. Is that the pathway to keeping the majority in the House, do you believe?
Well, it is something that energizes our base to look at Nancy Pelosi and how out of touch she is. She called these tax cuts and these bonuses and these higher paychecks that people are feeling crumbs. She said the tax cuts were going to be Armageddon. And then you look at Maxine Waters, who has already called for impeachment proceedings. She has called for violence and crowds to assemble around cabinet members or officials of the Republican Party. That's not where we want our country to go. So they represent the extreme of the Democrat Party. They represent what leadership would mean in that party. And then you contrast that with the results that you've seen from Republican leadership, results that have benefited Americans across this country with higher wages and better lives. So I think it's a good contrast, and it's a winning formula.
At the beginning of that comment, you said it fires up the base.
Yeah.
And it might bring you some votes, but does it bring you victory, do you believe, that strategy?
Well, you always need your base first, right, Bill? And then you go to independence. And when we go to independence and we make the economic arguments and we talk about where this country is compared to where it was 2 years ago, there's a compelling case for independence to look at what Republicans have done. Listen, it's about results, not resistance. That's what we're focusing on in this midterm. Democrats are only offering resistance. We're talking about results for the American people. I think the American people will favor results.
Thank you very much, Ronna McDaniel. We'll see how it goes tonight, okay? You bet. Thank you for that from the RNC. Primaries underway in 4 different states right now. 8 minutes past now. Back to the breaking news.
We've got breaking news coming out of Italy now. The Interior Ministry now saying at least 11 people are dead after part of a highway bridge collapsed during a violent storm in Genoa. Local media reporting at least 5 others are injured and in serious condition. 2 people have been pulled from the rubble. It's unclear, though, still how many more could be trapped. We're keeping an eye on this situation. We'll bring you any developments as they come.
Also, back to 2 of our other stories. New reaction coming in after anti-Trump agent Peter Strzok was fired from the FBI. What the president saying about that at this hour. Coming up, also, you got the fight between the president and Omarosa getting uglier by the hour. Kellyanne Conway is on deck to take all that on right after the break. Come on back. There's a lot of reaction coming in after the firing of FBI agent Peter Strzok. Strzok is at the center of a political firestorm after his anti-Trump text messages surfaced about a year ago. The president pointing to the text as proof of political bias within the agency, tweeting this. Just fired Agent Strzok, formerly the FBI, was in charge of the crooked Hillary Clinton sham investigation. It was a total fraud of the American public and should be properly redone. Kellyanne Conway, senior counsel to the president, with me this morning from the North Lawn. And Kellyanne, welcome back and good morning. Good morning to you. I got a number of things to tick through. Let's get to them. He's raising a lot of money online. How does his termination change the story for your boss?
You see the boss is very active this morning expressing his opinion on Peter Strzok. This is a man who was fired by the FBI. Why? Because the Inspector General there determined that he did 2 big things. One is he tried to tip the scales. He took action against a sitting political candidate. He didn't just put his thumb on the scales of justice as a very high up person at the FBI. He just sat on the whole scale, put his whole body and slammed into it. And that's number two. Number one, and most importantly, he was being anti-Trump in his text messages. Tens of thousands of text messages exchanged between 2015 and 2017 on his government phone. In addition, he put on his private email a highly sensitive search warrant. So this is somebody who was flouting the laws. It has a trust relationship with this country, given his very senior position in our FBI. Everybody watched his testimony a few weeks ago. He was just a jerk with a smirk, and now he's just a sort of two-bit ex-FBI employee with a Twitter feed and some GoFundMe page. Well, but everybody should know he was in charge. Yeah, but Bill, this is in charge. Why is it relevant? There's 35,000 people in the FBI. This is a guy who was in charge of 2 investigations and was political about it. He started in the Hillary Clinton email server investigation, favored her, started digging up dirt on Donald Trump because everybody was so worried, including partisans like him at the FBI, that Hillary Clinton was such a weak, pathetic candidate. They had to prop her up from the beginning, and here we are.
Okay. I don't disagree with some of the premise you're making there, but the president has a choice in this also, Kellyanne. He can release some of these documents. He has the authority to make them public. There must be a reason why he's not doing that. What would that be? Is he getting counsel that it would not be wise, or what would the answer be?
That is up to the president, and you're right, he has that discretion. But he's been very clear for a very long time, as have some members of Congress, that there's a frustration that some of the documents they've requested out of the Department of Justice have been coming at a glacial pace. It's picked up recently, and the more that it's released, the more we learn about Bruce Orr and his wife, Nellie. Bruce Orr is still at the Department of Justice. Why? He still works at the DOJ. Why is this person there who was working with Fusion GPS, Christopher Steele? You saw the text messages over the weekend. I hope you did, maybe on this network, basically nowhere else. And the president's absolutely right. If people want to investigate what was happening, the shenanigans in 2016, and may I point out, after Donald Trump was elected, much to the disappointment and the consternation of these people who didn't want it and didn't expect it, they were still trying to do that.
Have told him, don't make these documents public?
I will not comment on that. I stopped practicing law a very long time ago, happily. But at the same time, as counselor to the president, not counselor to the president, I will tell you that the president has respected the process all along. We've been very patient as this investigation has gone on over 1.2 million documents, over 33 witnesses, and yet we see every single day the revelations are coming out on the pro-Hillary left side of the ledger here. It's good that Strzok is gone because there are 35,000 or so rank-and-file FBI agents who don't deserve someone like that at the top representing them.
I know Omarosa is getting a fair amount of attention, and I know the response has been swift from the president of the West Wing. Here was the tweet late night last night. Mark Burnett TV called to say that there are no tapes of The Apprentice where I use such a terrible and disgusting word is attributed by wacky and deranged Omarosa. I don't have that word in my vocabulary and never have. She made it up. What do you want to add to that today, Kellyanne?
What I've said previously, which is I have never heard the president issue a racial slur about anyone in the 2+ years I've been working alongside him without interruption. And I would further say that Omarosa, who I considered a colleague here and a friend for a very long time, a lot of us women put together a shower for her before she got married. I know her mother, I know her husband. I always thought I had a good relationship with them and with her. And so I want to say she never pulled me aside, never said to me, hey, listen, I heard the president say this and I don't know what to do with it. So not only did I never hear it, but I think she's out there saying she had never heard it either. In fact, right after she was fired, she said she had resigned. And then she said, she was asked point blank, do you think Donald Trump is a racist? She said, no, I wouldn't have worked there if I thought that. And so, look, I just think that when your boss is, as she called him as recently as this morning, her mentor, that was their relationship, that he was a mentor, that she grew up in poverty in Youngstown, Ohio, and she wanted to be like Donald Trump. And for somebody who had opportunity after opportunity by Mr. Trump, now President Trump, candidate Trump, for 15 years, it does seem ungrateful to go and record people in the Situation Room. I see a lot of Democrats out there and national security experts who aren't exactly pro-Trump or pro-Kellyanne Conway out there saying, hold on, you're tape recording, you have a device in the Situation Room. People are very concerned about that.
I've spoken to her about her own history with the president. I know the president's not happy about it, but here was the tweet from 2 hours ago. when you give a crazed, crying lowlife a break and give her a job at the White House, I guess it just didn't work out. Good work by General Kelly for quickly firing that dog. That dog. I know he's not happy about this, but is that language necessary?
I'm telling you that I'm disappointed, and I think that the best play for Omarosa would have been to take credit for a lot of the great things that Donald Trump has done for this country, including for African Americans. He's pro-school choice and charters. That helps them get out of some of these failing schools. He's working on prison reform. He's working on drug reform. He obviously has presided over the lowest unemployment rate among African Americans in our nation's history. That should be the headline practically every day, and we rarely hear it. But I know those folks, I know that people in every community, including the African American community, feel it, because you look at some of the polling, people were crowing about the 1% of approval that Donald Trump had among African Americans in one of those bogus media polls. Now in one poll, it's up to 29%. Why?
But you have
because
the
they know
option,
he's doing well
I
for
get
them.
It, but you have the option to talk about the economy all day long, and I know it's going to be a big headline for coming up midterms. I'm just asking about the language right here, referring to her as that dog and just driving the story of Omarosa and likely selling more books for her along the way, which I know you don't want to do and the president doesn't want to do either. The other thing we could be talking about is this defense bill that was signed in yesterday.
Yes,
they had a big event at Fort Drum in upstate New York. This is a big deal for the U.S. military. You could be talking about that.
Well, we are talking about it, but you get to ask the questions. It's your show. So thank you for letting me get in there. Something incredibly important that happened yesterday. The president presiding over up at Fort Drum, and you saw the enthusiastic crowd there of our brave men and women in uniform. He's presided over the signing of over $700 billion in new funding for our military. What does that bill do for the U.S. military? It does. The top line is it gives revenue and respect to a military that received little of it, or too little of it, for far too long. And what this president has done through the omnibus, through the NDAA, is that he is telling our military and telling the world that our military will have the equipment and the resources and the respect that they need to be the greatest military in the world. This president believes in peace through strength, and the peace part is important and the strength part is important. So, and you see these enthusiastic crowds, it tells you exactly what America is focused on and what's important. And this president promised during the campaign that he would be pro-military, pro-veteran, pro-law enforcement, and that he makes good on that every day. I'm stopped in the street every single day having people thank me, people of all backgrounds, and they particularly mention how pro-defense, pro-military, pro-veteran, pro-law enforcement this president is.
Thank you, Kellyanne. Good to have you back here, all right? Kellyanne Conway from the North Lawn. Thanks.
Compound believed to be a training camp for a violent mission, and now the suspects keeping them prisoner have been granted bail. What is going on with this horrific story? We're going to bring you the details. Plus this, another tragic story after a man arrested for domestic violence gets his plane and crashes it into his house.
With uncontrolled.
Alert yet again on the deadly wildfires in California. A firefighter from Utah has died battling the flames. He is now the 6th firefighter killed battling California's most destructive wildfire they've seen in decades. Smoke is covering large parts of the state. Hundreds of homes destroyed, including animal shelters. This new video surfacing from a police body camera showing officers evacuating a dog kennel that was hit by the flames there in the Golden State.
And a Fox News alert, New Mexico judge releasing on bail the 5 suspects charged with child abuse and connected to an extremist Muslim compound. Bail has been granted against the wishes of the Sheriff's Department and the FBI. The suspects had allegedly been training the children to carry out school shootings. William Lajeunesse has the latest on this. William.
Well, Julia, the sheriff described the 5 defendants as Muslim extremists, and one of the men told the other he should come to New Mexico to die as a martyr. Yesterday in court, an FBI agent said the adults taught the children how to use firearms, and that one boy, now dead, would come back as Jesus and tell them who to kill, preferably police and teachers. Yet the judge said this does not represent a threat, and she refused to hold the 5 without bail. And defense argued that this is a case of religious freedom and the Second Amendment.
There's certainly no prohibition against training a 15 or a 13-year-old how to use a firearm, right? There's certainly no prohibition against that, correct?
None to my knowledge.
So the judge in the case is Susan Bacchus. She is a Democrat, a former San Francisco public defender, who lawyers have criticized in the past for setting low bail. Here she allowed a $20,000 signature bond. So instead of putting up, say, 10% in cash or collateral, no money up front. So 4 of the 5 likely, Julie, will be released today. The father, Suraj Wattaj, has a warrant out of Georgia. He likely will remain in jail. Julie?
It is shocking that this judge somehow considered these suspects not to be a threat to society, and they were allowed out on bail. But aside from that, let's talk about the autopsy and the identification of a little boy who died in their care.
Right, 3-year-old Abdul Wattaj had epilepsy, and after a trip to Saudi Arabia, his father, Suraj, stopped giving him medication and took him to New Mexico, where the FBI says he performed rituals to expel demons from the boy. Witnesses say that is how and where he died. Police believe they found his remains at the compound, but that has not been confirmed by the coroner. Now, they also found a rifle, 5 magazines, and 4 loaded pistols. Suraj allegedly told the kids to arm up when police showed up at the compound with a warrant.
Underneath some debris and additional stale clothing, there was a .308 style sniper rifle with a very large scope. There was a .30-30 lever action rifle, and I believe a Glock or some brand of handgun that was found there as well.
So after yesterday's hearing, Governor Susan Martinez, who first appointed Bacchus to the bench, said she strongly disagreed with the decision to give bail. Back to you.
All right, William Lajeunesse, thank you so much. Bill.
Got some more breaking news. Trump administration now standing its ground yet again against Iran. What the Ayatollah is saying in return about the U.S. this morning.
Plus, it is time for Paul Manafort's team to make their case in the criminal trial. So what's at stake today?
And the firing of Peter Strzok making a lot of waves in D.C. Another official getting ready to testify on the Hill. What could all this mean for the Russia matter? We will ask Alan Dershowitz live about that coming up.
He made a very, very serious mistake. The mistake was not opposing Trump. He's allowed to do that under the Hatch Act and other statutes. He's allowed to express any views he wants. His big mistake was not recusing himself.
Here's your Buick, sir.
News out of London now. British authorities investigating a suspected terrorist attack near the Houses of Parliament. A vehicle slamming into pedestrians and cyclists before hitting a barrier a bit earlier today. 10 people injured, 1 seriously. The suspect, a man in his 20s, has been arrested and is said to be not cooperating with authorities. Police calling the crash deliberate. They have seen this time and again in London, so stay with Fox News for the latest out of central London on what's happening there.
New reaction coming in following news of Peter Strzok's firing from the FBI. Strzok serving as a key player, as you know, in both the Russian meddling and Hillary Clinton email investigations. Well, now the attention turns to former Justice Department lawyer Bruce Ohr as he prepares to testify on his contact with Trump dossier author Christopher Steele. Ohio Congressman Jim Jordan weighing in on all of this last night.
This is the guy who said, we'll stop Trump. This is the guy who said we need an insurance policy. This is the guy who thought he was the James Bond of the FBI, the super secret agent man. So come on, that just doesn't fly. The American people understand it. Finally got him to admit, yes, the FBI was getting the dossier from Bruce Ohr, whose wife was working for the Oppo research firm the Clintons hired. That's what was going on here, and this is as wrong as it gets. And now the lawyer for Peter Strzok is saying, oh, he shouldn't have been fired? You got to be kidding me. He should have been fired a long time ago.
All right, let's bring in Alan Dershowitz, Harvard Law professor emeritus at the author of the case against impeaching Trump. Thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you.
All right, so the big issue here, to make clear, is not the fact that Peter Strzok didn't like the president. Everybody around him knew that. It's the motive behind that hatred, his hatred pertaining to the Russia investigation and whether his personal feelings could have obstructed the investigation. Is this the end of Peter Strzok, or is there more to come?
Well, we don't know if there's more to come. He made one serious mistake. He had a very distinguished career. I have personal sympathy for him. He should have recused himself. Once he sent those messages that didn't only say, I don't like Trump, but I'm going to stop him, we need an insurance policy, that created at least the impression of bias. Now, whether he could control that bias and not have it influence his decisions as he testified to? Nobody knows how to psychoanalyze an individual like that. All we know is it appears that he could have been biased, and that's what the Inspector General found, that the appearance of bias was enough. So he should have recused himself. He's a professional, and his failure to recuse himself, I think, is what led to his firing. And of course, that raises the question, why hasn't Rod Rosenstein recused himself? He also creates the impression of bias, not again from personal feelings, but because he's a witness in the case. He's the main witness in the case. You can't be the main prosecutor and the main witness in the same case. That creates an obvious conflict of interest.
So he doesn't recuse himself. So if you look at the bias, in his text messages, he wanted to stop the president from getting elected, okay? Who knows what his intentions were to hamper the investigation, but nonetheless, if you've got somebody who's behind an investigation and clearly is unhappy and hates the person who's being investigated, it's hard to keep that bias out of an investigation. So then the question now is, where does the Mueller investigation stand with Strzok's firing?
Well, I think everybody should ask themselves the question, if they were under investigation, would you want the chief investigator to be someone who says, let's get him, let's have an insurance policy? Look, the other issue is obviously the Steele dossier. Now, I don't think there's anything wrong with getting the Steele dossier from opponent research. You can get the material from whatever source you want. That's constitutionally protected. The issue is whether or not they should have notified the FISA court that they got it from opposition research. They should have also notified the FISA court that this guy, Steele, has made allegations that don't seem credible on their face, namely the kind of sexual allegations about what he claims took place in a hotel room in Moscow. I'm not even going to repeat them. If the FISA court was aware he had made those allegations, they would have said, no, wait a minute, this guy does not appear credible. And now we know he got the research from opposition research. No, we're not going to grant a warrant based on that kind of non-credible testimony. So that's where I think the problem arose. Did it have a pervasive influence on the investigation? There are many other sources of the investigation as well, but they certainly do have an impact on the credibility of the investigation.
Bruce Orr is set to testify behind closed doors on August 28th. This is a man who, in fact, after the Christopher Steele anti-Trump dossier was debunked, he continued to have a relationship reaching out to Christopher Steele. For what reason would you reach out to someone whose information has been proven false, which was used to potentially abuse the FISA court system? Trey Gowdy said that there's going to be no time limits, no public circus. Here's Trey Gowdy on Tucker last night. I want you to react to this.
We're going to be back, and we're going to interview Bruce Orr, not in a public circus setting, but in a deposition with no time limits, and we're going to get to the bottom of what he did, why he did it, who he did it in concert with, whether he had the permission of the supervisors at the Department of Justice.
All right, correction, he was appearing obviously with Martha last night. So how significant will Bruce Orr's testimony be to the investigation?
Well, first of all, we should all see what he has to say. Initially, behind closed doors, if there's any classified material, okay. But ultimately, the American public has the right to look him in the eye and judge his credibility and see whether he's the kind of person that we should believe, that the FISA court should believe, that the information he received was credible or non-credible. Ultimately, the American public has the right to make that kind of judgment, and closed doors should only be temporary.
All right, Alan Dershowitz, always great to see you. Thank you very much for coming on this morning.
Thank you. Sure.
After nearly 2 weeks, the prosecution now resting in the trial of Paul Manafort, the case now turning to the defense, with the judge expected to rule on some key motions today. Manafort pleading not guilty, 18 counts against him. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge outside U.S. District Court in Alexandria, Virginia. Catherine.
Thanks, Bill, and good morning. A short time ago, we just got word from inside the courthouse that the judge in this case, Judge T.S. Ellis III, has initially sealed the proceedings this morning. That means no media, no public. The judge has not offered an explanation, but there has been widespread speculation since this dramatic pause in the proceedings on Friday that involved the court security officer. That's the person who does logistics for the jurors, also tries to make sure that the rules laid down by the judge are enforced, so they're not talking about the case with themselves or with others, that in fact there may be a problem with at least one or more of the jurors. Short time ago, the defense team arrived here at the federal court here in Alexandria, Virginia. One of their first pieces of business is what's called a Rule 29 motion. That is their effort to get some or all of the charges dismissed before the case goes to the jury. This is kind of pro forma. It's standard. It usually doesn't go anywhere, but the defense team feels that they have good grounds to have some of the charges dismissed, specifically on the issue of bank fraud and these loans that Paul Manafort took in 2016 from the Federal Savings Bank, specifically that the CEO of that bank wanted the loans to go through because he was trying to obtain a job within the Trump administration. And in the newly released court documents, we have this email, which is from Paul Manafort to the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner. It's from November of 2016. And what it states is that Manafort is recommending the CEO of this bank for a senior position such as the Secretary of the Army, but it's worth noting that none of those positions came to fruition. The other big thing to watch for this morning is whether the defense is actually going to mount a defense and call its own witnesses, launch its own evidence, or whether they feel the government has failed to prove its case and they're going to let it rest at that with the jury bill.
Catherine Harris, thank you. Updates from the court there. Alexandria,
You're welcome.
Virginia. Thanks.
President Trump lauding his big defense spending bill after giving it the green light yesterday.
We will replace aging tanks, aging planes and ships with the most advanced and lethal technology ever developed, and hopefully we'll be so strong we'll never have to use it. But if we ever did, nobody has a chance.
How $717 billion will strengthen the military and impact the Trump doctrine abroad.
Also, rescuers hard at work. Flash flooding surging through parts of the East Coast. We'll tell you where this is happening.
And investigators honing in on several locations in rural Iowa on their intense search for missing college student Molly Tibbetts. We're going to be speaking with her family and her boyfriend next hour.
Investigators are conducting searches, canvassing the local area, and following up on all reported information. We will utilize every technology and all available resources in this investigation.
Well, heavy rains along the East Coast causing flash flood emergencies in Pennsylvania. Water surging into homes, closing down an interstate and leaving drivers stranded in their cars. A 12-year-old boy had to be rescued from a stream with crews using ropes and an inflatable boat. Those heavy rains are expected to continue today.
The National Defense Authorization Act is the most significant investment in our military and our warfighters in modern history. No enemy on earth can match the strength, courage, and skill of the American Army and the American Armed Forces. Nobody's even close. They never will be. We're standing up for our military, and we're standing up for our great American flag. We're standing for our flag.
That's the president, Fort Drum, New York, late yesterday, touting his progress in strengthening the military after signing a $717 billion defense bill. Daniel Hoffman, former CIA station chief, Fox News contributor in Boston today. Daniel, how you doing? And welcome back here. A couple of bullet points on the bill. Large increase in funding for nuclear weapons, missile defense programs, additional funding for more ships, planes, and armored vehicles, provisions targeting Russia and China in the fight against ISIS and the war on terror. You go ahead and summarize it. It's a lot of money. How does it make us better?
Well, this harkens back to President Reagan's strategy of peace through strength. We had some catching up to do after the Obama years, just as Reagan did after the Carter years when our defense was languishing. And really what the president recognizes, I think, is that we face a myriad of threats from state and from non-state actors, Russia, China with their efforts to exert their influence in the South China Sea, North Korea, Iran, the battle against terrorists throughout the world. So there's a lot for our military to do. And the president is, I think, absolutely right to upgrade our capabilities and bring us into the 21st century. Now, there's some challenges there for the budget. That's a lot of money to spend. Only the Veterans Affairs and Department of Homeland Security saw their budgets increase. All the other departments were decreased. That's just a decision the administration has to make about how to deal with the national security challenges we face.
Let's talk about one of those threats being Iran. There was some news from overnight where the Ayatollah put out a message to his own people saying there will be no war. suggesting that the problems that affect Iran are internal. What's going on there?
Yeah, he's got a very delicate balancing act right now because the Iranian currency and their economy writ large is in free fall. And he's criticized, Ayatollah Khomeini has criticized his own president, Rouhani, for mismanaging the economy, so he's trying to deflect the blame a little bit there. Certainly isn't interested in negotiating with the United States. He wants to portray us as Iran's enemy and Iran essentially as a besieged fortress, even though Iran is the aggressor in the Middle East. I think that was part of the reason behind the recent test of the Fatah missile, the short-range ballistic missile in the Strait of Hormuz during the IRGC military exercise. That was a message to the United States and our Sunni allies in the region that Iran can counter any attack by its enemies. It was also a message to the Europeans with whom the Iranians are hoping to negotiate some sort of a deal to enable them to retain some economic growth in spite of our decision to step away from JCPOA. Iran is negotiating with Russia and Europe over that.
On the Iran nuclear deal. Here is the specific tweet. There will be no war, nor will we negotiate with the U.S. You sure about that? Jack Keane thinks at some point soon they're going to come back to the table. You think they will?
It's certainly possible, but keep in mind, Secretary Pompeo has announced our strategy very clearly. Iran must halt nuclear enrichment, halt the development of nuclear ballistic missiles, withdraw their forces from Syria and stop aiding proxy militias and militant groups like Hezbollah. We're calling for change in regime behavior, not regime change, but I don't see how this Iranian regime can do what we're asking them to do to get back to the table. I think what we're asking them to do would be an anathema to their national security strategy, and I think that's where the rubber's going to meet the road, frankly. Let's see how the Iranian economy continues to struggle and whether protests develop. Iran is extraordinarily concerned about the potential for a populist uprising of the sort we saw in the Middle East during the Arab Spring and what we've seen in Iran with the Green Movement.
Thank you, Daniel. Daniel Hoffman, always get a good reaction. In Boston today, we'll get more reaction now on that spending bill we talked about. Arizona Congresswoman Martha McSally is our guest. She was with the president yesterday and will join us today at 11 a.m. Eastern Hour here on America's Newsroom.